Hello, I'm Toycat, and if you couldn't already tell, I like maps a lot. Like this one, which shows the 2 countries on Earth that are named after explorers, with the rest being named after political or religious figures. It's quite impressive that only this many countries are named after a person, but Jesus Christ, who did these guys name their country after? Anyway, with that said, when you look at most maps of exploration, you're going to get into controversial territory really quickly, because obviously, this map of the world views the entire world through the lens of European colonization. And, why is it that this area of the world wasn't discovered until the French laid claim to it? I mean, clearly people were already living there. Why do we say that Europeans get to discover things when there's already native peoples? And so that is a really interesting point. Even when you look at a map which just shows the political status quo that existed at the time, obviously there wasn't a nation state in the Australia. There was just some Aboriginal people chilling there, and so they didn't really have a formed government in the world at the time, but it still has this vaguely offensive vibe that a very desolate Canadian colony by the French has anything on the the Cheyenne or the Inuit peoples, which were better formed together in some cases. And so I figured the only way to cut this off of the source was to show this, one of my favorite maps, actual European discoveries, and it just makes everything non-controversial, and it shows land that was unknown to humans, that no humans had settled on at the time of their European exploration, and which European country found them. And I'm going to be going through this today and a few weird things about it, but first, did you know this video is a part of Project Exploration? That's right, it's a series of videos by different YouTubers showcasing, get this, exploration and discovery around the world. And more about that in a second. But first, let's explain more about the playlist and all that stuff after I explain to you actual human discoveries, actual European discoveries. Sorry, I get the 2 words mixed up because you know how I view the rest of you. See, that's right. I'm talking about, this is a joke about Americans. Is that okay? Can I make jokes about them? Anyway, Toycat says offensive things, the video. So anyway, with that said, this is land unknown to humans, with the official thing being that technically some of these lands were settled by humans that then left it later. I mean, you could technically argue that all land on Earth is theoretically going to be settled by humans. Someone might have gone there and never left a record. So this is just places where no humans existed when the European countries went there, and it's handily enough color-coded. So Portugal is green, Spain is orange, the Netherlands, you know how colors work, I'm not going to explain them to you, but if you look at this map through that lens, it's really interesting because of course Portugal and Spain coming up big. I mean, look at Portugal right here, it's insane. France does surprisingly little exploration, and interestingly enough to me, most of the orange dots are actually parts of other countries now. I mean, obviously the South American colonies all took over their stuff, but like the Pitcairn Islands, the Cayman Islands, and Bermuda are all parts of the UK I didn't even know were discovered by the Spanish. I mean, it makes sense when thinking about it, but still, very shocking and interesting to hear about. Same with a lot of Portuguese colonies, which, interestingly enough, again, Ascension, St. Helena, Tristan da Cunha, a lot of these territories belong to the British, and then a lot of them are also their own countries now. Also, looking around the world, you can see that there's an interesting distribution of certain countries had a lot of a certain part of the world. It's weird that Spain discovered all of these islands, but it was left up to France, okay, to discover Clipperton Island. Very strange, for example. And as you look through this map, it's very, very fun and interesting, and until you start to realize that, on this list is also Russia, the US, the Austria Hungary, and Norway. I mean, Norway discovered partially. It looks like they're going to claim credit for Greenland, and like they've got a few places up there, and they've got that partial Antarctica credit, but Norway didn't really do too much. Okay, that's fine. The US has a few interesting places. I mean, quite a few atolls in the Pacific Ocean weren't discovered until then. Well, the most interesting, by the way, is this one, Johnston Atoll. I didn't know anything about this, but this is an atoll that exists just in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and there's a lot of it used to even be a major store place for Ancient Orange, and so a lot of people lived here. It was a big military base, which they took a tiny atoll and they massively expanded it to make, by the way. Just, the United States decides they want a military base in the middle of the Pacific, so they basically build an island, they store a ton of Agent Orange, and they put a lot of people there. If you look at the population figures for this place, it's really interesting to see how, there was no one there, and then there was 1,000 people there, They kept him there roughly till 2007, and now everyone is gone. There is, interestingly enough, it's like a part of the US, but there was no official, license plates, and so therefore you could use your previous state's license plate there, which isn't usually true in territories and states. And, it's very fascinating, and there's so much to learn about even this individual random little atoll. And so when you go back to this map a little bit more, it gets more interesting because it's not just the US or Russia which have discovered places. Of course, Russia discovered some islands, but have you noticed how Austria Hungary is on that list? Austria Hungary discovered not only a little bit of land, but more than the US, more than France, and more than the UK. How is Austria Hungary so big on their discovery of non-continental land? And the answer is because, it looks like they discovered one place, as best I can tell, and that is Franz Josef Land, which is one of those places that when you hear Franz Josef Land, you're like, I don't think I've heard of that. Like, the what is he called? The emperor of, one of the last emperors of Austria-Hungary? Like, that can't be, nah, that's not, there's no Franz Josef Land in the Arctic. This map is a punk. They're not gonna fool me. But then you look, because you're curious, and you decide, what is this? This is something else. What is this Franz Josef Land I hear you talking about? And the answer is, it's a part of Russia? So, Austria-Hungary discovered some land, and it's now, we're going to have to go to the map, aren't we? And so, yeah, Franz Josef Land is a part of the map, which, honestly, it's weird that my mind's been blown to. I've known about Novaya Zemlya. Every time I look at a map, my brain just sees it. Everyone knows about the weird islands over here. A lot of people know about Svalbard and Greenland, but just the weird blobs of islands right here are called Franz Josef Land. What are they doing there? Who lives there now? Let's find out, shall we? So the answer is that, yeah, this land was technically first spotted by some Norwegian sailors. Sealers. They were probably also sailors, but it was discovered by some Norwegian sealers, and they didn't report their finding, and so they don't get credit. Instead, the Austro-Hungarian North Pole expedition happened to go past these islands, and so the lands, Franz Josef Land, is named after the emperor at the time, Franz Joseph I. Wow, isn't that quirky? However, they didn't, again, most colonization, most of these islands, when they were discovered, they were claimed for the country that took them. That's, look at the list of islands, and you can see how that's true. However, a lot of Arctic islands, it's like, yeah, what are we going to do with that? And so, even though they were discovered in 1873, it was another 53 years before the Soviet Union, which didn't exist at the time of their discovery, decided to annex the islands and make them an official post, which, by the way, now, even now, are basically only useful for research and military purposes. This whole landmass, 16,134 kilometers squared, that's big. For those of you, actually we got the mile units right there. This like big point is just so far north that it's not very useful, and so the population is 0. It's the same population as the Johnston Atoll, I think you'll find. But yeah, it's got, and it's also got a lot of the same characteristics of being a Russian Arctic national park and being like, okay, you're looking through it and you're seeing like, yeah, I can see how this isn't that useful. I do love the Russian flag design they've got going on in their northernmost military base. I can't imagine the horrors of having to actually be settled here as part of the military. But I like when you design a good flag into your buildings. At least the current Russian flag. Maybe the old one's a little bit gauche for that. And if you look at the temperatures, you see so the average high only ever gets about 2.1 degrees above freezing, and the hottest temperature that's been recorded there is 10.3 degrees, or 50 if you insist on using fake units, and the lowest temperature ever recorded there is -44, which isn't as horrible as you'd expect. The humidity, though, it's pretty good, and that's nice. And so, I had to look into this place because I was like, okay, how do you go here? If it's a military and research outpost, they probably don't want you there, but according to WikiVoyage, which we all love to use to work out these sorts of things, apparently it's 300 kilometers east of Svalbard, so it's not that bad, and the way you get in is you get a special permit to enter, and it's technically a part of the Russian Arctic National Park. That's the second time that's come up, huh? It's gotta be important. There's gotta be a way to do this. You can't eat or drink there, so you're gonna have to you're gonna have to get a permit in. You have to eat on the ship or the boat or the plane or whatever, or bring your own food somehow, and you'll be basically a modern day discoverer. There's what are you gonna do there? It's the answer is not very much. But like I was saying, Russian national parks, a lot of I feel like this is a lesser known thing in the world, but a lot of people don't realize that the national park network in the US was so popular when it was founded that most countries have an equivalent national park network now, and Russia is one of those. They celebrated 100 years in 2017, and I think it's so interesting to look through this list of national parks in Russia, because not only do you see some cute animals that they think spawn in each place, but also they show you like, there is this endless nothing where they haven't even established national parks. That's how much of a frontier a lot of Russia still is. It's like, yeah, we could go establish a national park, but how would we get there to do it? And I think again, it's a impressive reminder that even countries that are as big and still populous, and not like low income, they're middle income countries, still can't just get into the endless nature that exists there. And so yeah, a lot of their stuff is over here. Also, interestingly enough, one of the Russian national parks is in Kaliningrad. They don't have one in Crimea yet, which, looking forward to the controversy when they do that. But yeah, it's very interesting to me that, like, if you look into any one of these individual cases, the odds are it's probably unpopulated even now, especially if it's far north or far south. But there are so many islands which we genuinely did discover as humans that, like, again, a lot of people like to be like, man, you didn't discover America, you just took it over. And it's like, well, you also unified what was, even at this time, right? This is after the 13 colonies and, like a lot of other European empires were involved. Even at this time, it's like, how many individual tribes are listed here? And then on top of those individual tribes, they just say small tribes to gather them up. The number of individual groups who had nothing to do with each other, who were unified in no way, the fact of unifying that together is something. At least having that be in authority to someone. I mean, again, imagine a whole continent now where there was no law, there was no international anything. A whole continent like the Andaman Islands, where there's just native peoples and we let them do what they want. It sounds really great on paper, but it also sounds like a lot of preventable chaos and insanity. And this is meant to be a defense of colonialism. It's meant to be a defense of like, well, you can say that we didn't discover America, but you can also say that, like, well, I mean, did we discover these lands, or were they already there before us? I think you'll find some geese discovered the Azores, probably on some flight across the Atlantic. I don't know if geese flew across the Atlantic for humans. I'm assuming they didn't. But there's definitely been some birds on these places, or even if there weren't birds, what if some person sailed over there once? The Oceania, the weirdest continent, by the way. I think if you want to, because again, like, you can take any one of these islands and dive into it infinitely. Like, besides these places, what about, by the way, Australia? Like, what the heck? As in the 1800s, they still hadn't worked out how Australia worked. I looked into something called the Burke and Willis expedition, just as a weird bit of research. And in the year of 1860, 160 years ago, like, barely 2 lives ago, it's like, yeah, so we tried to explore the inland of Australia because we just didn't really know what was there. Really, 2 lives ago, we didn't know what was in the middle of Australia, and now I can tell you exactly what's in the middle. The answer is not very much. There's Cunnamulla, which is everyone's favorite place. There's a supermarket here now, and a BP. Let's see what prices are. Oh, they don't show their prices. But they do have auto gas, which, as opposed to manual gas. Anyway, my point here is it's amazing how many places we discovered because nowadays we want to discover land. I can just go look at Franz Josef Islands from above. Here's Champ Island. By the way, isn't it also weird that they kept Franz Josef Land? Like, if you look at the places Russia discovered, they're like, this is October Revolution Island. This is a terrible Russian accent. I'm going to stop. This is Bolshevik. They've got very Soviet names, but they left some very Western-sounding names here, right? Like Zemlya, Georgia, or like Alexandra Land, or Hooker Island. I mean, if you're going that far out, I feel like, anyway, with that said, my point with all of this video is just to say it's crazy how far we've come on the exploration front so fast. I mean, if this is 1700, right, where basically half of the world is still not even really known to Europeans, and then, even as recently as 1860, we're still out there struggling our way through the inland of one of the continents. The fact that now any single person can go looking around, and the fact that we do, by the way, just as a weird aside, we've discovered islands just with GPS. There are some places we didn't know existed, but if you look around Google Maps, I mean, it wasn't Google Maps, but if you look around satellite imagery, you will find that is insanity. And so yeah, I think it's cool. And that's what reminds me when people say like, we're never going to go to other planets. This is the reminder that, the speed of exploration is always very high because we're always looking for that next frontier. I mean, some humans say like, oh, it's so sad that you can't go and discover something now. We're working on that. You'd be surprised how little it takes. And so with that said, by the way, just as a fun fact about the Burks and Willis expedition, apparently it's famous, but I'd never heard of it, so sorry. But just as a fun fact, everyone died besides one guy, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And so, the fact doesn't that make it even crazier? By the way, just to mention that, like, so they went on a little trip from which nowadays you do in an hour by plane, and then almost everyone died, and they had to send out relief expeditions, and there's only one man who crossed the continent and returned alive. Only one person can do a journey, which, let's be honest, if you've not got a plane, you probably wouldn't do today. But, it's fun, in my opinion. I've always wanted to go to the weird parts of, like, even the coast, like Cairns. I know there's an airport, and I know there's some form of something happening here. What is it, I'm fascinated by the remoteness of some countries, which is why, at time of this video going out, I am in a very remote state. It's so remote. There's like one big city which everyone knows, and then it's nothingness forever. And there's something fascinating. It feels like I'm on a frontier, even though that's absolutely not the case. I'm still living in a very big city. But the moment you drive 20 minutes in the wrong direction, it's like, oh, do you wanna see what it looks like? Ooh, it looks like, actually this is a 2-lane road. Ooh, I mean, like 4 lanes, I guess, 2 in each direction. Ooh, how fancy. But yeah, it's interesting to me that there's still so much of the planet now which we haven't really settled. We've just kind of, like the Russia thing, like, this whole middle. But there's so much we've got to get round to, and we're going to find things. People are always saying you might find cancer cures in the Amazon. And speaking of curing cancer, would you like to cure the biggest issue of all, which is that, maybe you don't have enough YouTube videos going on. If that's the case, this was a part of Project Exploration put together by a friend of mine, Kobe. And if you want to see the playlist for that, wow, what's that? Is it in a top comment? I think it is. It might be in the. Is it in a clickable form that you could find with no effort by going under this video? I certainly assume so. You know what's annoying? I'm going to put it as a comment because the annoying thing about descriptions is no one reads descriptions. You should. It's the description. That's where the important things go. But I think too many people just started putting like the same description in every video, which I'm guilty of too. I have my Reddit and my Patreon link down there. In case you want more terrible videos like this one, more terrible videos, Patreon, less terrible videos, playlist. That's what I'm saying. Second channel, don't care. Have a good day. Actually, maybe I do care. Actually, okay, I want to show you. I want to do a video about bad maps, by the way. I've been sitting on this one for a while, but I also want to I feel like every one of these maps we could be like, isn't it strange that did you know the Philippines were named after Philip II of Spain? Maybe I should have known that. Isn't it weird? Look, every single map, I feel like you could spend an extra 20 minutes talking about. Maybe we should have a channel where it's just 20 minutes every map. Where it's just like, so, what is the deal with all of these over here? Why were they discovered by so many different countries, whereas otherwise the world is kind of split into exploration? What's the deal with the Italian colonies in Africa that went so poorly, clearly? Why is Italy so bad at colonization? I mean, also other things. Anyway, thank you for watching. Second channel. Don't care, because I'll see you all in the next one. Unless you have hair. Goodbye. What was that outro?